All right, welcome to 13.4 retrospective conversation. Uh, as I typically start these type of conversations off, something that I have learned long ago is that we should always come in with the same set of expectations. And I've learned this through what is called the retrospective prime directive, which states, regardless of what we discover, we understand and truly believe that everyone did the best job they could, given what they knew at the time, their skills and abilities, their resources available, and the situation at hand. At the end of a project, everyone knows so much more. Naturally, we will discover decisions and actions we wish we could do over. This is wisdom to be celebrated, not judgment used to embarrass. So I've always liked that because it makes sure that it's always assuming positive intent and we're learning new things as we go. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share screen as I'm going through this one last time. And go. And the highest vote getter that I saw came from Chen. So he is noting an area of improvement so if we rely on reviewer roulette, we're going to get a reviewer randomly within GitLab, particularly if we're up in the Ruby monolithic project. So he's making a suggestion that the first reviewer that we assign always come from within the secure stage itself. Knowing that it's quicker to brief them in on domain, not because they have domain knowledge. They're probably more familiar with what we're working on, and it can increase collaboration between different parts of the group or within the subdepartment itself. What do y'all think?
I strongly agree with this. I think that's something that the DAS team do already, and generally, especially when we're working on the Python code, but also I tend to send stuff, say I'm working on the GraphQL endpoint, I'll send it to another DAS developer. I'm wondering if I should extend what I'm doing, because I normally just send things to other people in DAS, but maybe I should send my things to people in Secure, not just DAS, when I'm working on a monolith.
Trying to catch up with notes as what you're saying. I can type. Out of sheer curiosity, Craig, and to put you on the spot, apologies for that. Is the stuff you're working on, is it typically, would more than DAST see benefit from the changes and features you're working on?
Not necessarily. So recently I've been working on GraphQL endpoints for on-demand scan, which is DAS specific. But I get your point. If I work on something that's more generic, it's probably useful for more people to see it.
Yeah, I was just wondering, I mean, if it was a stage-wide impact or something that was, I mean, dynamic analysis was first, but other groups were going to be following on in your foot from what you were before, then maybe it'd be useful to get outside the group. I'm brainstorming. I'm just trying to see if I'm tracking with what you're suggesting.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry for making you all watch me type. Any other thoughts?
It just makes me realize that there's an implicit assumption that we all keep up to date with the Rails code base, right?
What do you mean by up to date?
Well, if someone assigns you a review, you need to know what to do. You need to know you need to be able to provide meaningful input.
Yeah, and that's tough. So even if you're just looking at secure stuff, maybe you'll get a review for something that you've never looked at before.
I mean, maybe that's the point. Maybe that's a good thing.
Would it be a more efficient review if for you, I mean, assuming this is a Rails-based change, would it be a more efficient review if you were looking at the changes to discern whether or not they're satisfying the requirements that are listed in the issues?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So you're asking if there's an implicit assumption that all of us are keeping up with what's going on within the Rails code base, which to me revealed an implicit assumption that you were assuming you needed to review the quality of the code changes, but there's another dimension of reviews that we can offer. And that, did you solve the entirety of the problem?
Yeah. Yeah. But so yeah, there is another implicit assumption there that you're understanding what we're actually, the features that we're building.
Yeah.
And I think at the moment that's probably possible, that you can at least read an issue even if you've never seen it before and understand what it means. But it may get harder as secure gets bigger and our code gets bigger and a product becomes more complicated. But we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
I think generally that's how I do my MRs. I send an MR to somebody I work with regularly to see if what I've done is correct, if I've solved a problem, and if I've caused another problem in our code base. And then I hope the maintainer review picks up anything grander, larger that I've worked on.
I will admit that I haven't done a review in the Rails code base for a very long time. So maybe this will push me to spend more time investing in understanding what Rails is up to.
I look at the Rails code base, every now and then, and it changes quickly. So many times I write notes about, operations and how to get something working, and then I'll go and try and do it 2 weeks later, and it's all changed. So it takes a lot of effort to, stay up to date because, yeah, it changes fast.
On that, I have to say I'm very grateful we have a Thread Insights team. I remember what it was like before they hadn't really ramped up properly, and now they're there and they're kicking goals. I'm well, much more hands off, but I'm very grateful.
Okay. All right, I'll move on to the next one. Thank you for your commentary. Appreciate it. Next one that we had here was from Zach on another area for potential improvement, where as an author of an MNR, that we have the ability to resolve threads or resolve discussions within the MRs we're putting up, and he's experienced a situation where the MR that he was working on, where discussion threads were closed prematurely, and it came when response to some of his comments and discussions did not get responded to quickly. And so he's got a link to the MR in question. Should you want to follow along with the exact specifics of this item? It's the way that this was handled, where discussions were closed prematurely. They were closed without input from the reviewer. Could have been done better, even though it was towards the end of the milestone. And he's suggesting that we put a cap on the amount of time that we wait. Maybe it's 1 to 2 days. And then also at that time work to ping the reviewer. And if they can't, and if they're still not responsive, then work to reassign to someone else of the same backend team if possible. And so what do y'all think about this one?
I think that works well. I mean, this recently came up where Fabian was asking for a review, but it was, you know, Friday evening for me. So I said that he pinged me on Slack first, and I said I wasn't going to be able to do that until Monday. And then he reassigned the issues to Mo, because Mo was in a better time zone to take care of it. So that seemed to work pretty well.
I mean, I feel like I've been on both sides of this situation, where I've had people resolve comments that I didn't think were resolved, and I've probably done the same to other people. That SLO we have of 2 days is, I feel like it depends on how valuable or how important the piece of work you're looking at is. Like if we go back to the secure glossary, that thing took like, I don't know, 3 months or something. There was no way those issues were going to get resolved in 2 days. And like for such a contentious change, I think I ended up resolving issues that people probably weren't happy with, just so we could move on. So I feel like all of these are good suggestions, but I don't know if there's going to be one way that is the solution, if that makes sense. I think it's going to be contextual.
Would y'all object to me adding a viewpoint that's going to take this sideways?
You're a facilitator and a participant, right?
I struggle with a dual role. If I'm chairing it, then I think I'm the facilitator rather than a participant. That's why I'm asking for permission. And if y'all are not comfortable with it, I am happy to hold my remarks.
I say go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
To me, this speaks to both a limitation and a saturation of a push-based workflow, especially in a worldwide geographically distributed team. When we're pushing things to folks, there is no way to gauge how saturated that person is, both within their own work and the amount of merge requests they have been asked to review. It is also not taking into account their normal working hours. To me, I would desperately love to flip this script on its head so that it's not being pushed to people, but rather that folks could pull in a review as they have their capacity, as capacity allows for it. Though I admit that comes with its own challenges, in that it could be that no one picks up a review. But I've seen too many instances where we rely on a very small population of subject matter experts, and those individuals get flooded with 20 to 30 reviews at a time, particularly when we're at the close of an iteration. And I see it happening today, and that's my concern.
I think that would be a really interesting experiment to run. And I'm sure with the right incentives, people would pick up reviews. I don't know if that would be a silver bullet to this problem, though.
It's not. It's not. Where I think it's more applicable is for the Rails maintainer, because I would argue that a Rails maintainer is a scarce resource. Managementese folks. Managementese flip here. Scarce resource that is a congested resource, because there's a lot of people trying to get changes through a very small group of people. And you can't solve a congestion problem with randomness. And that's what reviewer roulette represents. Having said that, we're working to bring reviewer roulette to the analyzer projects. So I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth here.
Do we end up deciding whether to bring maintainers to the analyzer projects?
There's an open issue that I have been sitting on for months that is waiting for me to do it. But there is a request that we do so, yes.
How would that work? So say take that specifically, would all 4 developers be maintainers? And would it work how it's already working? Or
I think so. I think everybody who's a maintainer today would be grandpersoned in. I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure out the gender neutral term instead of grandfathered. Um, the but it would be a change for net new folks that are coming in. To me, it's a risk, particularly if you have a very mature feature that folks are coming on board and seeing for the very first time, to give them merge rights on day 1 or day 6, which is what our current onboarding process does. I get why we would do that when we were a younger stage. I don't know that we want to do that today. So, and why bring that up, even though we're not doing any hiring right now, is that we do need to have something in place for when hiring does open back up. So anyway, I talked over someone and I apologize.
I just want to say that it will come with other challenges, like most of our features are enabled at the maintainer level, so these people won't be able to see the security dashboard, for example. So that would be hard for dogfooding for them. But yeah, I agree with the merge request right at least. So
yeah,
this is something we can fine tune. I'm seeing another catalyst here on that specific issue, which is the catalyst for a tons of other problems that we still haven't found a good solution to, or at least working on implementing a solution for that. It's a code freeze. As mentioned, we were reaching the end of the milestone and people are eager to get their merge request closed and merged because they want to ship the feature within the milestone. If we had a more streamlined process where 1 more days or 2 more days won't mean you have to wait for next month, it will be less of an issue. But I mean, this is just a non-problem that we've seen some initiative to move to the CD approach, but well, we still have this monthly cadence when it comes to releasing things publicly. We've discussed already the feature flag rolling out that probably needs to be matched between self-managed instances and .com. So we still want this kind of consistency, and then the code freeze still exists when it comes to publicly releasing features. So it creates those situations of tensions and rushing things. And then if we favor that, the drawback is probably less quality and more bugs or less availability for our product, which is supposed to be more important than velocity. So it's painful, but I still think it's better to wait and miss the deadline than shipping something that is not. And so it won't reach the quality because it's not always true, but I mean, that is not fully resolved. And yeah, sometimes you just need more time to be reviewed.
Something else that I tend to do is if I'm waiting for, maybe I'm working on something that's a bit contentious and I'm waiting for feedback or to resolve something and I'm waiting too long, often I'll just jump on Slack with that person, and I find it much easier to resolve it in a quick conversation, Slack or a video call.
Yeah, I agree. Escalating to me is a very good approach to that, because if you just let the merge request sit for days, then it becomes more painful, and it generates that frustration of not getting these situations resolved. So escalating by going to a Slack conversation, a Zoom call, or even bringing more people sometimes can help, because I don't mean, you know, going through manager and things like that, unless there is a very strong discussion and we need someone to take a decision there. But anyway, the DRI should be making decision anyway. But yeah, and bringing more people into that, bring that into the weekly meetings definitely can help moving faster.
All right, I think we have enough time to get into one more of these. That was the end of anything that received votes. So I'm going to pick one that caught my eye, if you're okay with that.
Let me vote that one.
Yeah, the one from Fernando about multiple front end being a resource for multiple back end teams, but processes differ. We're all back end engineers here. If you allow me to include myself as manager, as an engineer. Have you all seen this? And how much of a pain is it?
As far as label use, I guess I don't really have a good understanding of what the, issue is there, because I don't know that I'm using a label incorrectly unless someone points it out and says that I'm using it incorrectly.
I feel like the only thing I know about labels is that I'm using it incorrectly, because they're always changing and I'm not sure I'm always up to date.
That's a good point.
The thing that the label that interests me the most is the workflow stuff, and it's probably the one I'm most bad at using. But I feel like I'd love to see our wall as a swim lane based on workflow. But I actually don't deal with the front end folks much recently. You've done some work recently with the front end folks, Craig? How's the experience been?
Yeah, it's generally good. And I've not come across any of these issues, but it might be the front end team who are having the issue and not the back end team. Yeah, I do a lot of talking to the front end developers on Slack as well, so it's real time. But no, I've not had any of these problems. I'm interested on the inconsistency between teams on implementation details and cross-linking of parent sub issues. Does anyone know what that means? Or an example of an inconsistency?
I guess this is what I'm missing from this, this comment, this discussion, is no, examples. So I can see what it is where things are different, and we can kind of come to an understanding of where they should be.
I can speak a bit. Okay.
Sorry, go, Olivier.
I want to say that I can speak a bit about the Serbia Convention, because this is something that is painful, to be honest. It's useful when followed consistently, and the problem is there. It's because it's not applied consistently, and it's sometimes hard to deal with, particularly when plans is changing. It makes things really confusing for people trying to find their way, because it's not like using native features like child epic with parent epic, or issues attached to an epic, because this is native. These are native feature integrated into the UI, so it's really easy to navigate between those. Parent issue, sub issue convention is just made of specific titles, the way you write the description, and the label, which is sub issue. So it's a convention that you need to learn and apply. And as any other workflow labeling stuff, people just can't handle everything. And sometimes they just don't follow it carefully, which makes it super difficult for people to understand how things are organized. So this is why there were ongoing discussion about dropping that approach and having issues and epics instead. So I can feel the pain of the front-end team because they're actually, working with several groups, and each group has their own way to work and with the different implementation of their workflow. And this is why I wasn't advocating for a stage-wide workflow, because it will make the changes seamless for those front-end resources, because they can work on multiple groups depending on the load. So, but I assume that it's too complicated today, and we need to go back to something simpler so that it's easier to share and be consistent at the stage level.
Makes sense. Just to be clear, this is talking about multiple secure backend teams, right? Not multiple GitLab backend teams, right? Was there an outcome to that whole parent sub issue? I know at some point that some of the issues we were working on in DAS, they were trying 3 different ways.
Officially, the Serbia Convention is part of our secure handbook, even if it's not written there, but in a issue description as a convention. But not every groups are applying them, because some of them don't need it, to be honest. There was some try to follow what the the threat management sub-department is doing by using native epics and child issues instead. But this comes with its own drawbacks, so it wasn't settled yet. And we were waiting for the workshop, which happened last week. So I need to catch up with that, and this might help moving forward on the next iteration of the secure workflow to see how we want to integrate that.
Epics are only group level though, right? So that, I don't think that would work for projects, but maybe I'm confused.
Projects are within the group. So
anyway, all our issues are on GitLab, the project. So yeah, okay.
If I could ask, there was a comment made earlier about not sure labels are being used correctly because they're always changing. Can we unpack that a little bit?
So the latest one that there's secure defend. There's a label that's applied. I've never seen that one before.
The section label.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, section.
That
it's a scope label, section, and secure and defend, or secure and defend, or some combination thereof. Yes.
Yeah, so that's a fairly new one. There's some new ones in Dast. So Dast now is split into 3, Zap Berserker, and there's another one there. They're just some of the recent ones that I've been looking at. So the severity and priority have changed recently, although I can follow what that one is. We still use workflow, but I don't know if they're important because I don't think anyone uses them, at least in Dast. There's a category : Dast, and I have no idea if anyone uses it or if I should be applying it or not. That kind of stuff. I'm just not sure. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. So in general, is it a fair restatement to say you're not sure what to pay attention to because of the churn, and we've overloaded it for too many overloaded labels for too many purposes?
Yeah, and I should say I don't mind what labels we use. I just want to know what ones to use. Like, is there a page that describes on a Dast issue, these are the labels we should have? That would be very useful to me. Because then it can change as often as it wants, and I'll just look at the page every now and again.
A Dast issue and a Dast merge request.
Yeah, I'm not sure what belongs in a merge request or not. I've never worked that out.
Me either.
Most of the labels are company-wide level, and they are describing Markdown file, which is called issue workflow, I think. This is probably also in our documentation. Yeah, this is the GitLab doc in the contributing part. I'll try to add link. So this is stating what are the different kind of labels, what they are made for, and which one you should have. And you already know probably that if you forget to add some of the labels, well, the bot would remind you that you need to add this one and this one. Most of the time, labels have a purpose, and it helps for processing the issue within the different steps of the workflow. Also, it helps for metrics, for measuring the cycle time, for example. It helps on the merge request to count the throughput metrics for every group, for example. So that the different usages that you can have behind using labels. I admit there's a ton of them. And what I use is a snippet. I have a tool on my Mac, which is with Alfred, and with 2 shortcuts, I can just paste all the labels I need on the dependency scanning issue or the container scanning issue, and I'm good to go. So it's a huge time saver.
I can imagine. They do seem a little redundant in that, like if it's group dynamic analysis, don't we know it's section secure defend, and don't we know it's DevOps secure?
Yeah, it is. The problem is we used to have this group versus team discussion. You can identify the product area which is impacted and the group of people working on the feature, and sometimes it can be different. So this is a feature for the secure and defense section, but this can be worked on by group composition analysis, even if it's a feature for category DAST, for example. That's the kind of things that could happen. It was happening a lot for us because of the integration between all the categories of secure. It's less of an issue for other teams maybe, but yeah, it looks really redundant to have. I mean, you could have a label for company GitLab, for example. So you will have all the different levels or engineering department. But yeah, sometimes it looks a bit redundant, I agree.
I could honestly reduce section, DevOps, and group down, those scoped labels down into a couple of purposes. One are throughput metrics. So what throughput has that particular section or stage or group contributed to the changes that are introduced within the product itself? The other is ownership over roadmap item itself. So I could easily see as an example that we're not dealing with tightly today, but I could see coming in the future where we will, if we stay within the constraints of operating within a runner or within a review application, that we're going to have to move those particular features forward in order to fully realize everything we need to do within Secure. So it won't be our feature, but we will implement it. And so that's where you'll see some of section in DevOps and group disagree when we get into those use cases.
Okay, fair enough.
There is an example in the Secure near-term roadmap that I think I can speak of because I think we're transparent on this, but it gets into business planning. So I'm going to risk it. And if I have to not put this on YouTube, I'll keep it off of it in this example. The example that comes to mind is with secret detection within static analysis. There is a plan that we're going to give it away to everyone. And yes, it is in core, but it only operates in core if you include the vendor template. We're talking about it's on. It is on always, and you have to turn it off. Flip the script. Beyond that, there is some work that you've probably seen happening to like CI minutes and what you get at the various licensing tiers. How can we, if secret detection is on for free and it is on for everyone, how can we make it operate and not burn your CI minutes when we're running a secret detection job? Those are the kinds of questions that are not ours to answer, but we're going to have to. So that's just to make it concrete, just to, and speaking for the part that I do know of this. So it's confusing. It is a mind warping thing, and I will freely admit it. But it's useful.
Good to know. And
Yeah.
like I said, happy to have all the labels there are, just
What
as
are
long as
they?
I know what they are and where to find them.
Okay. As a minimal iterative improvement, I would like to ask, would it be useful for it? Since we now, not only do we have the secure subdepartment section of the handbook, but we also have individual sections for individual groups and teams. Would it be useful for us to document things like in the dynamic analysis section for a DAST issue at MR, these are the labels that you should see applied. And these are the
I think
labels you
so.
should,
And
so, yeah.
bringing it back to this issue, I think then you could actually compare the different groups and see how much they differ.
That's true. Okay. Okay. All right. That's something. I was hearing something here, and so I just wanted to tease it out a bit. Okay. Thank you. We're a bit over time. Is there another item here that y'all would like to discuss, or is on this issue, or is there on this retrospective issue that you'd like to discuss, or is there another item that has not been recorded you'd like to bring up? Okay. I'm going to stop the recording, but if y'all can hold on for a minute, I have a question.